You can see me here. Okay, well that was random. I don't have any candy, I'm sorry.
Do you have juice?
This is going to be a new age kindergarten class, right? Okay, well, this panel is on the influences of film noir in anime. So it is going to have a little bit of an academic twist here. We're going to look at kind of a crash course of film noir, what it is, how it was introduced to Japan, why it would appeal to the Japanese mindset at the time, and some anime that exemplifies some of the influences that we can see. Now, when I say the words film noir, the term film noir, what comes to your minds?
Black and white movies.
Black and white movies. Okay, what else? Yeah. Dark, lots of shadows. Mm-hmm.
Usually detectives are usually involved somehow, or somehow mystery at least somehow. Shady type characters.
Mysteries, detectives. Mm-hmm. Anything else?
French word.
Very good. That's right. Stop reading ahead. All right, first let me tell you who I am. My name is Sean Cashman. I am studying for my PhD at NC State, and I kind of studied this for fun, so I'm not an expert on it. A lot of the material I'll be drawing from comes from the 4 books that are listed on your little handouts, the top 2 in particular. I have one of them with me here. It's James Nairmore or Paul Schrader, so if you have any issues with anything I say, take it up with them. All right? But otherwise, let's take a look at some of this. Now, film noir is very unique. You can't walk into a video store and find a film noir section. Most of the time you'll find the film noirs mixed up. They'll be in mystery, they'll be in horror, they'll be in action-adventure, sometimes science fiction. However, if you walk into a video store, you'll find an anime section typically, right? Yeah, I walked into a video store once and I found Pokemon sitting right next to a rock Sakadoji in the same section. I see a problem with this. Children's movie, hardcore porn. Yeah. Anime, I think you'll agree with me, is not a genre per se, right?
Right.
Genres are often the terms we use to classify movies. It was an idea constructed by the Motion Picture Association to help us recognize certain films and the audiences they're geared towards. So you'll have genres like family films, which are geared towards families, so that tells us specifically who they're geared towards. You'll have genres that kind of give us an idea of what's in the film. Science fiction. So if we rent something from the science fiction section, we can probably expect to see some machinery, some futuristic ideas, that kind of thing. Or the genre will be based on the kind of emotion it elicits, like comedy, horror, scares you. Anime is not a genre. It isn't, right? You should not see Pokemon next to a rock Sakadoji. In the same way, film noir is not a genre. You'll often hear people refer to it as a genre, but that's a mistake. Film noir was a term coined by French film critics to describe the type of films that were coming out of America. So it is an American style. They came out between 1941 and 1958. The first quote-unquote noir is often considered The Maltese Falcon. Some of you might have seen that. It's one with Humphrey Bogart, right? And the last one is, I'm going to show a clip from it a little bit later, is Touch of Evil, Orson Welles. Now, the filmmakers doing these films at the time did not think they were making film noir. They were just making films, per se. So, it's kind of an abstract concept, film noir. There's no set definition of what it means or how it's constructed, really. What we do notice is that film noirs have certain narrative elements that are common amongst them and certain cinematographic or visual elements that are common amongst them, but there's no set list. Okay, if it has a femme fatale, if it has the detective, if it has black and white, it's a film noir. Might not be one. Citizen Kane came out at the same time. It has a lot of those elements. special in that they're what I think Gene Hackman said, they're the director's favorite genre because they're art films, right? They don't do well in the box office. The fact is they usually do very poorly. Most people don't like them. I went to see Dark City, which is kind of a more modern-day spoof of film noir with a couple of friends. They walked out angry and said it was a terrible movie and that we really should have gone and seen Titanic again. I was not pleased with that statement. I enjoyed the film. I thought Dark City was awesome. So there are elements of film noir in modern-day films too. In particular, you'll see influences a lot of times in modern films. What we have to really understand is that noir isn't just a period piece. It didn't just come out between 1941 and 1958. They don't make them anymore, right? Sin City, which recently came out, is what we would call a neo-noir. It has a lot of the classic noir elements. It recognizes that these are noir elements, and it uses them. There were other neo-noirs that came out too. Taxi Driver, for one. Chinatown is considered a neo-noir. In fact, one of the staples of noir is the crisscrossing lines across people's faces done by Venetian blinds. When they did that the first time, it was really cool, but then they overdid it in film. And in Chinatown, it opens up with Jack Nicholson sitting in his office. He's a detective, and he's showing this man pictures of his wife doing something naughty. And the man gets angry and he starts beating on the window, and Jack Nicholson says, "Careful with the Venetian blinds, we just put them in." Knowing tribute to the use of Venetian blinds in film noir. So I gave you a list with a couple of the different elements you often see in film noir. You'll find the anti-hero. Oftentimes the main character of film noirs are not good guys. Usually they're pretty pathetic. Oftentimes they're criminals. And in many cases, the law are the bad guys. Or at the very least, they don't have anything to do with the plot whatsoever, and you never see them. So you have kind of this anti-hero appearing. You also see a lot of a loss of male masculinity. We don't know what it means to be men. And that's a very standard narrative trait of film noir. Women are often portrayed as the femme fatales. You've probably heard that term at some point in time. Femme fatale, dangerous woman, right? Well, I think we can probably automatically say we see that today. Femme fatales come in a variety of different forms, but typically they're beautiful, dangerous, and manipulative. And they tend to twist and turn the main male character into evil or into doing evil acts. Death is often the theme of film noirs, more so than anything else. Death in the past, because film noir characters are just trapped there. They can't get past their own past. They are lost. The reason for this is because film noir was heavily influenced by existentialism. You probably remember hearing about that in some psychology or sociology class at some point in time. But existentialism is, right, life is meaningless. Well, most characters in film noir feel that way. In fact, most of them are already dead. And for an example, DOA, Dead on Arrival, it's a classic film noir, opens up with a man walking into a police station. The man goes up to the police chief and says, "I want to report a murder." The police chief says, "Okay, who was murdered?" The man says, "Me." And that's accurate because the man in question has been poisoned and he's dying. So he spills his guts, he tells his story, and then he falls over dead on the police chief's desk. And that's the movie, Dead on Arrival. Pretty neat movie, even if it is a little dull at times. It's very psychoanalytical. Oftentimes, films and film noir films are more interested in kind of Freudian psychology. So you'll see a lot of, the Oedipus complex, typically. The Electra complex. Those are complexes where characters are obsessed with their parents and want to have sex with them. Really creepy, I know, but that was one of the main themes you'll find in a lot of film noirs. For example, The Grifters, which is a neo-noir, stars John Cusack, came out in 1990. obscure film. Very few people have seen it, but John Cusack, throughout that entire film, is obsessing over his mother. He even dates a woman who looks just like his mother and tries to make her like his mother. It's really scary. If you ever want to see John Cusack doing something creepy. And then it was heavily influenced by modernism, of course. So a lot of the scenery in film noirs are these straight, angular buildings, sharp contrast, sharp curves. And that translates well into anime as well, because straight, sharp, obscure, that's easy to draw, that's cheap to paint. Right? We like it. So, modernism played a part, and also liminalism. Now, liminalism is this idea of half-breeds, half-walking. One of the films we're going to look at, Touch of Evil, takes place on a border between Mexico and the United States. And that's a classic theme in film noirs, because we're unsure of our identity, we don't know who we are, we're kind of trapped in this limbo state. And you'll definitely see that in a lot of anime. Half-breeds. Charlton Heston plays in Touch of Evil as a half-Mexican. They just tanned him up. It's really funny. But I don't think we'll get to look at it. Well, yeah, the scene we're going to look at has him in it, so you get to see Charlton Heston with a really bad tan pretending to be Mexican. So, there's all the idea of half-breeds. We can see that in anime. Inuyasha, Vampire Hunter D, they're trapped. They're kind of caught between two worlds, right? Visually, this is what film noir is most known for, is its look. It's often considered black and white, but neo-noirs exist, and they use color, but their colors are very muted. They're not bright, they're not sharp. We're not going to see the Power Ranger type colors. We're not going to see Rezzo's colors. So, you're going to see very muted colors. Like Chinatown uses brown throughout it. If you watch this film, just pay attention to brown. Everything's brown. Even the walls are brown, the floor is brown, the characters are brown. It's just dull. Right? But again, Sin City did theirs in black and white as an homage. Dark City primarily uses black and white too, but you'll see some color in there. It's often used very stylistically. Now, another element that you'll often see in film noirs is this tight framing. We'll get really close to a person or really close to an object. That again translates well to animation, because we don't have to draw much scenery there. We just have to close in tight, right? So, that was done to create a claustrophobic feel, to make you feel nervous, tense. You often find bizarre, off-angle shots. They decided to play with that. I mean, think 1960s Batman, Adam West, where they would tilt the camera horribly. They did that a lot in film noir to create really strange angles. You'll find objects pushed in the foreground. One thing they really love to do is extremely high angles, pointing down on people to make them look like ants. It goes into that existentialist phenomenon, to make them look small, to make them tiny. You'll also find framing constantly. This is probably the most influential aspect of film noir, is they would often position people between doorways, so they'd be framed, or against a wall. You know, if I were being filmed in film noir, I'd probably be right here with this nice little frame behind me. So, they would use framing a lot. In Fritz Lang's M, which is a movie about a psycho killer in Germany in 1930. He was foreshadowing some stuff. Billy Wilder knew what was going on. Fritz Lang. Billy Wilder. Fritz Lang knew what was going on. So yeah, the psycho killer is often shown framed between knives. So you'll see a lot of framing and a lot of low-key lighting. Two-tone lighting is often what we call it. You'll have one light in the foreground, maybe one light in the background. Normal lighting setup for most films uses 5, sometimes more. If you'll see in a lot of modern films, you'll notice the characters have these nice little light white dots in their eyes. That's because they're shining lights directly on the actress or actor to give them these shiny, bright, happy eyes. If you watch The Lord of the Rings, they do this particularly with Galadriel. They have like 8 on her to make her really glowy. And you can see all of them reflected in her iris. And it kind of gives it a neat ring effect. It's really cool. But anyways, that's off topic. So, low-key lighting, again, that translates well to animation. We don't have to do gradation, right? We have one color, and that the other color is where the shadow is. We're good. And oftentimes, you'll see with the visual style, voiceover narration is used a lot. The opening of Sunset Boulevard has been parodied a lot, but it shows a man dead, floating in a pool, staring at the ground. And then we hear a voiceover narration of the dead man telling us how he got there. Right? So, and it's told through flashbacks. And you'll see that too in anime that's influenced by noir. They use flashbacks constantly to tell us backstories. Think about Cowboy Bebop. Every time they had to tell us a character's backstory, and they did that for every character, it was done in flashback. And if you'll think of the one episode that was Jet's backstory, that one's very noir. It's definitely tribute. Done in voiceover narration. He had the whole gumshoe hats, the 30 look, which is a little inaccurate since it was the 1940s that film noir really came into fruition. Now, film noir, the problem is that there's no set number of these elements that make something a film noir. What you end up with, though, is a certain mood, as Paul Schrader would put it. He called it a stimmung. You can tell it's a film noir. Okay? It creates a mood, an identifiable mood, but it is still an abstract concept. Right? It's like trying to define something that's funny. Well, it's funny because it made me laugh. It created a mood. But there's no set ingredient for creating a joke that's funny or a mood. Now, I just want to tell you real quick, the 4 factors that influenced film noir that kind of created this genre, and keep in mind this is a crash course, so I'm running through this very fast. You'll take entire classes on film noir studying this, but film noir basically came about because of 4 different reasons that we can identify. The first one is the pessimistic mood that emerged after World War II. Right after World War II, a lot of men come back from the war, and they're hoping to go back to their old jobs. Not quite, right? Because there were women doing their old jobs. Since a lot of women had to be working during the war to make up for the men that we sent overseas to get shot. So, alright, it was a bad joke, I'm sorry, alright. So there was a pessimistic attitude really coming about from that. There was no work. They'd just gone through a horrible war. They'd seen horrifying images that didn't fit the stereotype of this wonderful war. We go out, we fight, we're great. It was very pessimistic. It was very negative. So a lot of people didn't want to see happy movies like Wizard of Oz. It just didn't appeal to them. They wanted to see movies that really fit more with how they were feeling, which was poorly. So film noirs came about in that sense to construct a really negative image. Most film noirs end bad. I'll tell you that right now. Most of the time the characters die. They are tragedies. DOA, for example. He's dead before he walked in the door. And he dies at the end. It's a sad ending. So they're very pessimistic, very negative. They have that existential background, right? Life is meaningless. Life is pointless. We're going to die. The second reason that film noirs came about was there was a relaxation in the censorship codes. During the war, everything was heavily censored. But after the war, they kind of just said, do what you want. So directors said, great, now I can show violence. And whoa, some of those film noirs really pushed the limits of violence in their day. The neo-noirs even pushed them more. right? Taxi Driver. Has anybody seen Taxi Driver? What's the ending of that like? You're laughing. Yeah, it's a blood spree, right? So you have Robert De Niro just going at it with people and blasting their brains out. There's a lot of violence coming about with these relaxations of censorship, and certainly in anime. You can see a lot of violent influences there too. Now the third reason is the introduction of American pulp comics that started to become really popular at the time. Now, V for Vendetta is based on a pulp comic. Sin City was based on a pulp comic. Yeah, two?
No, I was just, yeah.
Okay, all right. Thought I was missing something there. Okay, so yeah, these were all based on pulp comics, and a lot of the movies that were shown, The Maltese Falcon was based on a pulp comic. Right? So you had these hard-nosed stories, which were really dime store cheap novels that had no, very bad plot. It was mainly just violence and sex and guns and, yeah, stuff that would really appeal to the American audience than most others. So the plot stunk. Really, in the end, dialogue is harsh and gritty, just terrible, wretched. And you'll see that in a lot of film noir, which is why they didn't do well in some box offices. So you had this relaxation of censorship codes, the American pulp comics, and the influence of German Expressionism. This was really key for the visual style of film noir. A lot of film noir, like I said, has those sharp angles, those curves, really black, harsh contrast between white and black. And that's based on German Expressionism, which was very popular. A lot of German directors, like Fritz Lang, Billy Wilder, left Germany because they were Jewish. They fled Germany, came over here, and started making movies. And, well, they brought the German Expressionism with them. And American directors were going, wow, that's neat. Let me take that up, too. So German Expressionism was introduced due to that. So we can attribute a lot of film noir to World War II. Yes. Let's take a look at some film noir, some classic film noir, so you can kind of see what I'm talking about. I'm going to stick in. See if I can get this to work. No, I don't want to record. We're going to look first at a clip from The Third Man by Carol Reed. Okay. The Third Man by Carol Reed. Let me first say that this story is about a man named Holly. Holly has been invited to Vienna, Austria for a job opportunity from his friend Harry Lime. Holly arrives in Vienna only to find a funeral for Harry. So he's arrived just in time to see his friend buried. And Holly's drunk, and he's a writer of pulp comics. And he just doesn't have anything to do, so he hangs around for a while in Vienna. It's beautiful, scenic imagery in the background. We have these wonderfully Gothic buildings, and they're all crumbling to pieces because this is right after World War II. So we have post-war Vienna, Austria, and Holly's wandering around in it, and he discovers that maybe his friend Harry is not quite dead. And this scene is when he first sees Harry. And Harry's played by Orson Welles. Probably one of his best roles ever outside of Citizen Kane. So let's take a look. I want you to take a look particularly at the position, at the angles, tilted.
What kind of a spy do you think you are?
contrast of black and white, very classic noir. Let's look at another quick clip. Show a clip from Touch of Evil, which also stars Orson Welles. You'll have to forgive me there in that. Sorry. Most film noir are considered B movies, so finding them last minute is challenging. Orson Welles, however, is a well-known director, and they have his stuff. Let's see if we can get this up and going.
folks American citizens?
I am, yes.
Where were you born, miss?
Mrs.
What?
Philadelphia.
My name is Vargas. Hey, Jim. See who's here? Sure, Mr. Vargas. Out on the trail of another dope ring? On the trail of a chocolate soda for my wife. Your wife?
Yeah, you're right, officer.
Hey, can I get through? A lot of talk up here about how you cracked that brandy business. Yeah,
What?
I hear you caught the big boss. Only one of them. The Grandys are a big family. Good night. No purchases, Mr. Lineker.
Hey, I got the...
You're American citizen, miss?
I got the ticking noise.
Okay.
No, really, the ticking noise in my head. Do you realize this is the very first time we've been together in my country?
Do you realize I haven't kissed you for an hour?
And you'll notice that was the first cut. We didn't cut for a good long time. So we have this liminal side going on here. The officers were a little surprised that those two were married because, well, Charlton Heston was Mexican, right? Kinda. And the other woman was obviously white. Uh-oh. So that was kind of risque even then. Well, what's funny, though, is her dress is actually a white sweater. And back then they had this thing called sweater girls, which were basically prostitutes. So that's a kind of a little obscure fact. All right, but you get an example of those two, what film noir looks like. You can see some of the style. The question isn't who done it. We know the bomb's going to go off. It's just when, right? When is it going to go off? So we have this anticipation thing going on. Actually, Alfred Hitchcock, who did a lot of film noir, once said that the best way to create suspense is to let your audience know something that the characters in the screen don't. So if you have two characters sitting at a table and they're eating and suddenly the table explodes, it's boring. Yeah, it's surprising, but there's no suspense. However, if you see the bomb placed onto the table, the two characters come up, they sit down at the table, they start eating, and we continually cut back and forth to the clicking clock on the time of the bomb, then the audience becomes much more interested in whatever mundane things the characters at the table might be saying, because it might be relevant to the plot. So, quite an interesting character, Alfred Hitchcock. But again, that's off topic. All right. Now, so we've looked at film noir. There's your crash course on it. How was it introduced to Japan? Well, before World War II, Japan loved American films. They were avid consumers of them. However, during World War II, it was prohibited by the government. And then World War II ended, make sure I give you the right date, in 1945. At that time, American films were reintroduced to Japan, but they were highly controlled. Now I'm going to quote this, because Douglas MacArthur set up a kind of a criteria for films that could be shown in Japan. He made sure that no film could be showed that had anything fused with militarism, revenge, nationalism, anti-foreign sentiment, distortion of history, approval of religious or racial discrimination, excessively light treatment of human life, direct or indirect approval of suicide, approval of or degradation of wives or women, and the admiration of cruelty or unjust violence.
There's nothing good about it.
Yeah, that eliminates all film noir. However, nothing makes a film much more interesting to aficionados than if it's illegal, right? If you're not supposed to watch it. So we can probably assume that some of the directors in Japan were able to smuggle some stuff in for their own private viewing. But the general populace of Japan did not get to see film noirs until after the occupation of Japan ended, and I believe that was in 1953. We're still in the midst. Between 1941 and 1958 are when film noirs were made. That film that I just showed you, Touch of Evil, came out in 1958. It's often considered the death knell of film noir, but you can see why. So, the Japanese public could get to see some film noirs in the later part of the classical period. Now, how do we know that film noir made an impact in Japan? Well, we can tell by looking at the films of Akira Kurosawa. Now, those of you who are unfamiliar with Akira Kurosawa, he's considered one of the greatest Japanese directors ever. His films are phenomenal. The Seven Samurai has an anime based off of it, right? And that's an Akira Kurosawa film. Kurosawa did 3 films in particular that are considered film noirs. The first one was The Bad Sleep Well, which came out in 1960, and it kind of fuses Hamlet with a Warner-style crime movie. The second film he did that is considered a film noir is High and Low, and that came out in 1962. And that was an adaptation of an Ed McBain policier. Again, we have some pulp comic influences. And then in 1961, he also did a film called Yojimbo, which bears a striking resemblance to the Dashiell Hammett novel, The Red Harvest. Now, Dashiell Hammett wrote The Maltese Falcon. So, you can see that Akira Kurosawa pulled a lot from film noir. He did 3 of them on his own. And Akira Kurosawa's influences in Japan are pretty heavy. Again, Seven Samurai as an anime. Now, when we take that, let's just take this a little bit forward. How can we find noir in anime? Well, we have to understand first why noir would appeal to the Japanese mindset. And really, in Japan, right after World War II, they were kind of in the same state as we were. Really, there was a lot of pessimism going on, and there was a lot of unsurety over identity, particularly masculine identity, because Japan traditionally has those very strong roles, right? This is what a man does, this is what a woman does. Well, that was being changed and altered, and anime shows the difficulty that they've had in overcoming that. We end up seeing very weak male characters a lot of times, who we wouldn't really call masculine, like, say, Keitaro from Love Hina. He gets beaten constantly by every woman in this show, and he's powerless to do anything about it. And let's take Ranma, the epitome of masculinity, right? But what happens when he gets some water? Darn, now he's a woman. So we can see those influences, and strong female characters were certainly appearing, right? In anime, Sailor Moon, among many, many other magical girls. Okay? So Japan had a very similar mindset to us, and so that they were very pessimistic and they weren't really sure. So film noirs appealed to that because it had that kind of emotion behind it. And Japan also has a very unique ability to absorb what it likes from other cultures, and then discarding the rest or changing what it likes to match itself. Like, say, the Christian wedding. A very small percentage of Japan is actually Christian. They love the Christian wedding. Think about some animes you've seen where characters have gotten married. It's usually in a church bells, and they're wearing the traditional suit and tux with the woman in the nice white, frilly, long, huge outfit, right? That's a Christian wedding. And yet, do we see any traditional Japanese weddings? Not very frequently, because a traditional Japanese wedding takes 3 days. Christian weddings take 20 minutes. 10 if you want to go past the priest. Right? Just go straight to the justice of the peace. So, we can do it fast. We can do it for anime, right? So you can see those influences there. So, again, with film noir, they pulled what they liked, namely some of the pessimism, namely some of the psychoanalytical elements. That's oftentimes the appeal that we have for anime, is that it's much deeper up here. We know oftentimes what's going on, we just don't know why, right? And that's the theme. It's for a lot of film noirs. It's not who done it, it's why did they do it. Like Fritz Lang's M, which I mentioned earlier. We know who the serial killer is. We just don't know why he's killing all these people. So you can see those influences there. There are other ways that anime have been influenced. Now, of course, anime came out. I'm sure most of you know what the first anime was. Astro Boy, right. Tetsuwan, movies. What was it? Astro? Okay. Yes, Tetsuwan Atom. Right? Came out in 1963. Well after film noir had had its classical heyday, and neo-noirs were beginning to be made. It wasn't until like 1965, 66 that neo-noirs were starting to be made. So anime came out at a good time to be influenced by it. And while anime is, of course, uniquely Japanese, it was heavily influenced by Walt Disney, the big eyes, right? As well as the brothers Max, who did Popeye, and the Fleischer brothers, who did Betty Boop. All Western directors. So they pulled a lot from Western ideology and cinema there. In fact, there's a lot of the, I should also mention this, in Japan, a lot of the traditional Japanese directors were fired and barred from filming during MacArthur's time. They had to use more Western themes. A lot of them came back after MacArthur left, but not all of them did. A lot of them just quit. Now, so we can see some noir themes in anime. How about death, the obsession with death? And look at X, Clamps X. Everybody dies in that. And Fushigi Yugi is another example of an obsession with death and sex. Right? You'll see weak male characters like Keitaro, strong female characters. There's also this obscuration of morality. In film noir, there's no clear good guys or clear bad guys. You don't have the good guys wearing white hats and the bad guys wearing black hats. You have an obscure morality going on. To give you an example, Holly, in the first clip that we looked at, he's a drunkard, he's a womanizer, and he writes cheap dime store novels. And by the end, you're not even sure if he's a good guy or a bad guy. You don't know what the heck he is. Harry Lime, who was played by Orson Welles, he's a very charismatic, wonderful guy, but he's a scumbag. He's poisoning children for profit. So, yeah, it's very hard to tell who's the good guy and who's the bad guy. So let's think about Princess Mononoke, Hayao Miyazaki's work, right? I got time. Just make sure. I have some anime I want to show, I know. Okay, so Hayao Miyazaki, who's the good guys or bad guys in that film? Kind of hard to tell. Even Lady Eboshi in that, who is trying to kill the animal spirit god, she cares for lepers, and she's trying to do good things for society. And, on the other hand, you have Princess Mononoke, who's just trying to protect the animals, but she's exceedingly violent. So we're not really clear who's the good guy or the bad guy in this. In the middle, you have Ashitaka, and I guess he's the good guy. You can call him if you really want to, but he's still, I'm not really sure what he's all about. So I'd like to talk particularly about some of the noir elements that we'll see in some anime. Let's think about Cowboy Bebop first. Most of you are generally familiar with that series that was shown on Cartoon Network for a long time. Let's think about Spike, the main character of Cowboy Bebop. At one point in time, Spike actually says that his left eye is fake, and all it does is replay the past. That's typical of a noir male. He is trapped in the past. Can't get over it. Why is he trapped? Well, because of a woman. Right? Blonde-haired woman who drives a red convertible. Can we say femme fatale? Even though we'd like to think of Faye perhaps as a femme fatale, she's not really. She too is trapped in the past. And she doesn't really lead to Spike's death, whereas the other woman, I think Julia was her name, she definitely heads him towards his death. So Spike is a dead man walking. 5 minutes? All right, well, let's skip ahead a bit. Thank you for paying so good attention. Let's look at noir. Noir definitely has some film noir themes. In fact, it's on the title, right? You only have to read it. Now, noir changes things a bit. Instead of the male character, we have the female characters. Two of them. They don't really know who they are. Their identity's all messed up. We're trying to figure out perhaps their feminine identity, but these two don't have a feminine identity, aside from the fact that they're women and they're wearing dresses. There's no love interest. There's no expression of anything that you would consider feminine. They go around to shoot people because they're a couple of assassins. Right? They do a lot of masculine, traditional masculine things, and they're in search of who they are. They spend half the series trying to figure out what noir means. Well, surprise, surprise. And you know where they do that? France. Okay. So, let's take a quick look at some noir, since we only have a few minutes.
Run, Sean.
No, run. All right. One. I thought I had a whole hour. Okay. The weapons that they use are from World War II. They're handguns from World War II, although one of them has been refitted and changed. You'll see in noir a lot of sharp angles. Almost every episode is about death. In fact, when these two characters are first introduced to each other, they just talk about how they're going to kill each other. All right. By the way, the scene we're going to look at is a little violent, so small children might want to close their eyes. Let's fast forward this. Can we say obsession with violence? Keep pointing at the screen. Alright, we're going to have to fast forward a little bit. Okay, here's main character Muriel. She's going to go meet Kurika, whom she has been sent to kill. There she is. Okay, so you see a lot of muted colors in this. Sharp, yeah. Tilted angles, high shot. I'm going to skip ahead a little bit to a scene that kind of looks like something you'd see in The Third Man. Okay, here we are at Collected Image. Abandoned warehouse. Left angle. Objects pushed to the foreground. Very dark. Muted colors. Blue and red seem to be the theme colors for this. She's in blue, the other girl's in red.
Shall we talk?
This film is slow, very psychological. Half the time you're not even sure what the characters are trying
Suppose
to
we
do.
start with who you are.
I'm just going to fast forward since we need to wrap this up. So you can see it fast motion. Chase sequence. Up the stairs. Alright, we're going to see a lot of the chase sequence. It kind of resembles what we saw in The Third Man. High angle. Framing. Lots of framing. That kind of reminded me a little of Third Man. Right. find that's typical of film noirs is that there's a lot of violence, but not a whole lot of gore. Shadows, close-ups, objects in the foreground, dead people. Butt shot. Framed. Framed again. Framed again. Framed again. Hello. You're not framed. Okay. Alright, let's wrap this up. So, you can kind of see, this is a good series to look at that exemplifies film noir and how it's made its impact in anime. And the little handouts I gave you gave a couple of other suggestions to look at, from Cowboy Bebop to Big O.